So let's talk a bit about the other tools that are out there in the Microsoft space and how we can work with them. So GPO is great. I always just considered it the OG config management, and it is the problem with it is the visibility. So when you start using something like Puppet, you will immediately see the value in things like transparency or even being able to see all the resources managed by a system. It's really hard to get that today in the Windows world where something can be installed by hand or script or GPO or other types of systems. What systems are managing these? What aspects of that are they managing? Is it just something that's run once or enforced or a particular version or build? So that's something where moving your group policies into Puppet and managing those registry keys and account policy settings, it really allows you to see what's happening in that system overall. So not just your security policy, but also the OS configuration and all the other things are happening to that system. We also get to see those intentional versus corrective change reports. So say a developer went on, made a change to one of those policies or registry keys, just completely unaware of any protections against that. The continuous enforcement of Puppet will bring that back into compliance. So we also have intentional versus corrective changes. So you can see when something goes out of compliance, Puppet's going to enforce that and push it back into compliance. So we'll actually have a report of changes that took place, either intentionally, which means we push new code out to it and it's brought it into compliance with the new code, or corrective, which means, say, a developer goes onto the system and makes a change they shouldn't have, it'll bring it back to where it needs to be. Now, inside of SCCM, that's usually something where there's a team or people may access aspects of it, but not necessarily a tool where there's many administrators and contributors to it. So it's something where I typically talk to those teams around what value they're getting out of SCCM. It can do a lot of things, but the biggest combination I see are companies using it to say, get that system on the network, so use the deployment services, use Puppet to manage the desired state. Potentially, if SCCM is your patching solution, that's something that would stay there. Otherwise, patching can come into Puppet as well. Now, in the PowerShell space, there are two ways that we integrate with PowerShell. One is on just the scripting side. So you have the ability to make a task inside of Puppet Enterprise, which can be as simple as taking your PowerShell script and dumping it into a tasks folder. And that's going to allow you to put it into Puppet Enterprise, apply those access controls, but then also scale it out. So if you have people on your team that maybe aren't the PowerShell experts or are more graphically driven, there's a console where they can go in, just select the tasks they need to run, the parameters they need for it to succeed, and the systems to run it against. And so they can use what maybe your advanced PowerShell scripters are doing down the line instead of having people make changes in different ways. So we're streamlining and standardizing how that work is being done. And that's really one of the benefits of doing something with DevOps practices here is if we have a known workflow, we can inject testing around that workflow to ensure that everything is working correctly and then also automate the deployment. We can also use some of the aspects of Puppet inside of these tasks. So something like Hyra, where we have a key value data service, we can specify our data across the different slices of our infrastructure and then just run that same script, but have it go look up the values and inject it into the code. The last piece here is around Windows infrastructure. So essentially cloud migration of Windows infrastructure. And this is another space where I talk to a lot of customers that are having challenges. One of the values that I've always gotten out of Puppet, long before I ever worked here, was its ability to allow you to model once and then go between platforms. So we were able to take something like AWS and make it perform more like just another data center. Now, there are many other things in AWS or Azure you can take advantage of, but if you're in a position where you need to start moving resources into the cloud and then work on that refactoring later, Puppet is an invaluable asset to have here. It allows you to describe what that server looks like now, and then moving that server into AWS, Azure, wherever you're going to move it to, you can have a consistent rebuild of that system in whatever other cloud you're going to. So again, it makes it just act like it's another data center. When you combine it with Hiera there, it can go in and just look up, oh, I'm in US West 2. I should pull these values for my code. So just to give you that general overview, what I covered in the last slide of the various pieces of Puppet here, the three types of automation we're really offering through the Puppet Enterprise platform are tasks, desired state code, and plans. So tasks, again, for on-demand or scheduled script or command execution, they allow you to use the language of your choice. So I can write in PowerShell all day and quickly add it as a task. Same thing if you have a Linux team, they can be writing in Python or shell scripting or whatever they like and bring it in as well. And it also allows you to build implementation details in, so you can have a single task that can determine if you're on a Windows system or a Linux system, and then trigger the right script to get the job done. So that's the very easy way to just get started with automation with Puppet, is if you already have some scripting, but you want to start automating and applying access controls, let's move it into a task. Desired state, this is where we're looking for our enforcement of policy. So we want to get consistent configuration and keep it compliant. Anything that falls in that description for you would go into desired state, along with integration into PowerShell DSC. So PowerShell DSC is its own desired state language. Puppet has an integration into that, where it's essentially a one-to-one mapping to those resources that are available. But you have the value of being able to use our enterprise RBAC system, being able to pull in that data from Hiera and have all the reporting of changes taking place. And then plans are that last piece of the puzzle. So that on-demand or scheduled orchestration of all these various pieces. And this is also an easy way you can start. So I've done a lot of work that's just, I'm throwing up a YAML file that walks through the 4 scripts that need to run in order. And then you can mature that into using the Puppet language. So we have the full strength of a language here, where we can say, store that output from a command into a variable, assess what's inside that output, and then take additional actions based on that. So some tips for how you can get started with Puppet quickly. The 3 big ones here I'll talk about. So one I just kind of went over, PowerShell into tasks or plans. Second is to take advantage of that Puppet agent and the information it can bring back to you. And the third is to export your group policy and start bringing that into the fold in Puppet.